be fine. In which Cimmerian receives a formal call from her companions in dire captivity. Kazul slept late the following morning, and Cimmerian was afraid that she would leave before Cimmerian had a chance to ask about the dragon's after-dinner conversation. To her relief, Kazul called her, and as soon as she was thoroughly awake, and asked Cimmerian to bring in the brushes for cleaning her scales. "What was that crystal your friend mentioned last night?" Cimmerian asked, as she laid out the brushes. "The one she thought King Tokaz would use somehow to find out what the wizards are doing." "The king's crystal?" Kazul said. "It's one of the magical objects that belongs to the king of the dragons." "But what does it do, and why did Warrung think that King Tokaz wouldn't want to use it?" "Using the crystal is difficult and tiring, and Tokaz is getting old," Kazul replied. "Zareth was right to say that the crystal ought to be used, but it will take more evidence than we have right now to persuade the king of that. As to what it does, the crystal shows things that are happening in other times and places. It's useful, but it can be very difficult to interpret correctly." "Oh, a crystal ball," Cimmerian said, nodding. She tapped Kazul's side, and the dragon bent her elbow so that the scales were easier to reach. "The court wizard at Linderwall had one, but I had to stop my magic lessons before he got a chance to show me how to work it." "The king's crystal is more like a plate, but the principle is the same," Kazul said. "A crystal plate?" Cimmerian blinked. "No wonder nobody talks about it much. It just doesn't sound right." Kazul shrugged. "The king's crystal is much more accurate than any ordinary crystal ball, and if crystal plate sounds odd to most people, it means that fewer of them will try to steal it." "Was that what the silver-green dragon meant when he said that if the wizards started wandering through the mountains, you'd lose half your magic in no time?" "I never heard that wizards stole magic rings and swords and things." "Not magic things," Kazul said. "Magic. Wizards steal magic. That's where their power comes from." "How can a wizard steal magic?" Cimmerian said skeptically. She climbed on a stool and began working at the ribs of Kazul's wings. Wizards' staffs absorb magic from whatever happens to be nearby," Kazul said, stretching out her left wing so Cimmerian could get at the base. "That's why they're always hanging around places like the Mountains of Mourning and the Enchanted Forest. The more magic there is in the area, the more their staffs can soak up." "What would happen if someone stole a wizard's staff? Would the wizard still be able to use it?" "The wizard wouldn't be able to work any magic until he got it back," Kazul said. "Most of them have a great many anti-theft spells on their staffs for exactly that reason. Of course, it happens anyway, now and then, and as long as the wizard and the staff are separated, the staff doesn't absorb magic." "It doesn't sound like a very good arrangement to me," Cimmerian said. "I can think of half a dozen ways a staff could be lost or forgotten or stolen or something. It doesn't seem sensible for a wizard to depend so much on anything that's so easily mislain." Kazul shrugged. "They seem to like it. I can see why you don't want them in your part of the mountains. Can you? Do you have any idea how unpleasant it is to have part of your essence sucked out of you without so much as a by your leave? Not to mention the side effects." "Side effects?" Cimmerian said, puzzled. "There, turn around, and I'll do your other side." "Roxem isn't the only dragon who's allergic to wizards," Kazul said dryly as she shifted her position, "or rather to their staves. We all are. Roxem's just a little more sensitive than most. That's why we made the agreement with them in the first place." "The dragons have an arrangement with the wizards?" Kazul nodded. "To be precise, the king of the dragons has an arrangement with the head of the Society of Wizards. The wizards stay out of our portions of the Mountains of Mourning, and we allow them partial access to the Caves of Fire and Night. At least, that's the way it's supposed to work. King Tokaz is getting old and forgetful, and lately wizards have been turning up in all sorts of places they aren't supposed to be." Like that wizard Zeminar I met on the path, Summerine said. Do you think he really was the same Zeminar that's the head of the Society of Wizards? I doubt that anyone, even another wizard, would dare impersonate him, Kezul said. He has a nasty reputation. Summerine remembered the hard black eyes and sharp features of the wizard she had met. He had certainly looked nasty enough, even when he was pretending to be nice. He was sneaky, too, or he wouldn't have tried to trick her. And he had been very annoyed when Summerine got off the ledge without his help. Summerine frowned. I wonder what he really wanted, she mused. Do you suppose he'll stop by the way he said he would? I almost wish he would try, Kezul said. There was an angry glint in her eye, and her claws made a scratching sound against the stone floor of the cave as she flexed them. Don't wiggle, Summerine said. If Zeminar is as tricky as everyone says, he won't come while you're here. He'll wait until you've gone somewhere and I'm alone. True, Kezul frowned. Then she looked at Summerine, and her eyes took on a speculative gleam. He probably thinks you're as silly as most princesses. So he'll be hoping to trick you into giving him whatever it is he's after. And if he does, then maybe I can fool him instead, Summerine finished. And once we know what he's after, we can decide what to do about it. Kezul and Summerine discussed this idea while Summerine finished brushing the dragon's scales. There was very little they could do to prepare, since they did not know when Zeminar might show up at the cave, or what he might do when he arrived. Then Kezul went off to inspect the ledge where Summerine had met the wizard, to see whether bits of it were still invisible. When Kezul had gone, Summerine went into the library to hunt through all the books and scrolls of spells. The behavior of the dragons at dinner the previous evening had made a considerable impression on her, and she wanted to see whether she could find a spell to fireproof herself. Until then, she hadn't realized that when a dragon lost his temper, he started breathing fire. Not that she was planning to do anything to irritate Kezul, or any other dragon, for that matter. But the dragons at dinner had been too annoyed to be careful, and she didn't want to get burned by accident, no matter how sorry the dragon might be afterward. She's so smart. She's so smart. I love her. At first, Summerine didn't have much luck. She hadn't had time to do much organizing in the library, and most of the books and scrolls were lying in haphazard, dust-covered piles. Some had even fallen onto the floor, and there were spiders everywhere. Summerine realized that if she wanted to find anything, she was going to have to do some more cleaning first. With a sigh, she went to get a bucket of water, some clothes for washing and dusting, and a handkerchief to tie over her hair. She worked for several hours, dusting books and manuscripts, wiping off the dirty bookshelves, and putting the books back in neat rows when the shelves were dry. She found 2 books and 5 old scrolls that looked as if they might be interesting. These she set on one of the tables to look at later. She had just pulled a stained and yellowed stack of papers out of the back of the second-to-last bookshelf when she heard someone hallooing outside. Now what? She muttered crossly. She set the papers on the table with the rest of the books she was planning to look at later, and went to see to see who was there. To see who was there, okay. To her surprise, the noise was coming from the back entrance, not from the mouth of the cave. She hurried into the passage, rounded the corner, and found herself facing 3 beautiful, elegantly dressed princesses. They were all blonde and blue-eyed and slender, and several inches shorter than Summerine. The first one wore a gold crown set with diamonds, and her hair was the color of sun-ripened wheat. The second wore a silver crown set with sapphires, and her hair was the color of crystallized honey. The last wore a pearl-covered circlet, and her hair was the color of ripe apricots. They looked rather taken aback by the sight of Summerine in her dust-covered dress and kerchief. "Oh, bother," Summerine said under her breath. Then she smiled her best smile and said, "Welcome to the caves of the Dragon Kezul. May I help you with anything?" We have made the perilous journey through the tunnels to see the Princess Semerine, newly come to these caverns, to comfort her and together bemoan our sad and sorry fates. The first princess said haughtily, "Tell her we are here." "I'm Semerine," Semerine said. "I don't need comforting, and I'm not particularly sad or sorry to be here. But if you'd like to come in and have some tea, you're welcome to." The first two princesses looked as if they would have liked to be startled and appalled by this announcement, but were much too well bred to show what they were feeling. The princess with the pearl circlet looked surprised and rather intrigued, and she glanced hopefully at her companions. They ignored her, but after a moment the first princess said grandly, "Very well, we shall join you then," and swept past Semerine into the cave. The other princesses followed, the one with the pearl circlet giving Semerine a shy smile as she passed. The light keeps changing and it's distracting me. Semerine, wondering what she had gotten herself into, brought up the rear. The princesses stopped when they reached the main cave, and the ones in the gold and silver crowns looked a bit disgruntled. The one in the pearl circlet stared in unabashed amazement. "My goodness," she said, "you certainly do have a lot of space." "Eleonora," the gold-crowned princess said sharply, and the princess with the pearl circlet flushed and subsided, looking unhappy. "This way," Semerine said hastily, and led the three princesses into the kitchen. "Do sit down," she said, waving at the bench beside the kitchen table. The gold-crowned princess looked at the bench with distaste, but after a moment she sat down. The other two followed her example. There was a brief silence while Semerine filled the copper tea kettle and hung it over the fire, and then the gold-crowned princess said, "I am remiss in my duties, for I have not yet told you who we are. I am the Princess Ketterwell of the kingdom of Roxwell, now captive of the dread dragon Gornal. This," she nodded toward the princess in the silver crown, "is the Princess Helena of the kingdom of Pornbooth." Pornbooth? Okay. Pornbooth, now captive of the dread dragon Zerath. And this, she waved at the girl in the pearl circlet, is the Princess Eleonora of the Duchy of Toron Marsh, now prisoner of the dread dragon Warrung. "Pleased to meet you," Semerine said. "I am Princess Semerine of the kingdom of Linderwell, now princess of the dragon Kazul. What sort of tea would you like? I have blackberry, ginger, chamomile, and gunpowder green. I'm afraid I used the last of the lapsang sochong, okay, this morning." Is that an actual tea? Lapsang soch. "This morning. Blackberry, please," Ketterwell said. She gave Semerine a considering look. "You seem to be most philosophic about your fate." "Would that I had so valiant a spirit." "Would that I had so valiant a spirit," Helena said in failing accents. But my sensibility is too great, I fear, for me to follow your example." "If you don't like being a dragon's princess, why don't you escape?" Semerine asked, remembering that Kazul had said that 3 princesses in a row had run away from the yellow-green dragon, Morans. Ketterwell and Helena looked shocked. "Without being rescued?" Helena faltered. "Walk all that way with dragons and trolls and goodness knows what else hiding in the rocks, ready to eat me? Oh, I couldn't." "It isn't done," Ketterwell said coldly, "and I notice that you haven't tried it." "But I'm enjoying being Kazul's princess," Semerine said cheerfully. "I suppose I might have been upset if I'd been carried off the way you were, but I can hardly complain as it is, can I?" Eleonora leaned forward. "Then you really did volunteer to be Kazul's princess?" Ketterwell and Helena turned and stared at their companion. "Where did you get that ridiculous idea, Eleonora?" Helena said. "Warrung said," Eleonora faltered. "They're so mean to her." Come on. Okay. "You must have misunderstood," Ketterwell said severely. "No one volunteers to be a dragon's princess. It isn't done." "Actually, Eleonora's quite right," Semerine said as she set the teacup in front of her visitors. "I did volunteer." She smiled sweetly at the thunderstruck expressions on the faces of the first 2 princesses. "I got tired of embroidery and etiquette." Kitterwall and Helena seemed unsure of how to take this announcement, so they made polite conversation about the tea and asked Cimmerian questions about the current fashions. Eleonora didn't say very much, and the few times she tried, either Kitterwall or Helena jumped on her. Cimmerian felt rather sorry for Eleonora. The princesses swept off at last, still somewhat puzzled by Cimmerian's attitude. Cimmerian gave a sigh of relief and set about cleaning up the kitchen. She was just rinsing the last of the cups when she heard someone hesitantly clearing her throat behind her. Cimmerian turned and saw Eleonora standing timidly in the doorway. "Hello again," Cimmerian said. "Did you forget something?" "Not exactly," Eleonora said. "I mean, I told Kitterwall I did, but actually I just wanted to get away from them for a while. I hope you don't mind." "I don't mind at all, as long as you don't expect more hospitality," Cimmerian assured her. "I have to get back to work on the library." "What are you doing?" Eleonora asked. She seemed really interested, so Cimmerian explained about the fireproofing spell. "It sounds like a wonderful idea," Eleonora said when Cimmerian finished. "The dragons are careful around us, but it would be nice to have..." Hold on. "It sounds like a wonderful idea," Eleonora said when Cimmerian finished. "The dragons are careful around us, but it would be nice not to have to depend on them not to lose their tempers." She hesitated. "May I help?" "I don't think Azul would mind," Cimmerian said, "but you'd better change clothes first. The library isn't very clean, I'm afraid." Eleonora looked down at her silk gown, which was embroidered heavily with silver and pearls, and giggled. Cimmerian took her into the bedroom and found a plain, serviceable cleaning dress in the magic wardrobe. It took 2 tries before the wardrobe figured out that she wanted to dress for someone else, but once it caught on, it provided a splendid selection in Eleonora's size. Well, they went to the library. Then they went to the library and got to work. Cleaning was much more enjoyable with Eleonora for company. By the time they finished dusting and straightening the last bookcases, the 2 girls were fast friends, and Eleonora was comfortable enough to ask Cimmerian straight out how it was that she had come to volunteer for a dragon. "It's a long story," Cimmerian said, but now Eleonora insisted on hearing it. So Cimmerian told her and then asked how Eleonora had happened to be carried off by Warrung. To her surprise, Eleonora flushed. "I think it was the only thing left that they could think of," she said, not very clearly. "My family, I mean." "I don't understand," Cimmerian said. "It's because I'm not a very satisfactory princess," Eleonora said. "I tried, I really did, but it started when the wicked fairy came to my christening." "She put a curse on you?" "No, she ate cake and ice cream until she nearly burst and danced with my Uncle Arthur until 2 a.m. and had a wonderful time. So she went home without cursing me, and Aunt Ermintrude says that's where the whole problem started." "Lots of princesses don't have christening curses," said Cimmerian. "Not if a wicked fairy comes to the christening," Eleonora said positively. "And that was the only beginning. And that was..." Okay. I'm moving. I don't care. "And that was only the beginning. When I turned 16, Aunt Ermintrude sent me a gold spinning wheel for my birthday, and I sat down and spun. I didn't prick my finger or anything." Cimmerian was beginning to see what Eleonora was getting at. Well, if you didn't have a christening curse, so Aunt Ermintrude told Mama to put me in a spinning wheel in a room full of straw and have me spin it into gold," Eleonora went on, "and I tried. But all I could manage was linen thread, and whoever heard of a princess who can spin straw into linen thread? It's a little unusual, certainly. Then they gave me a loaf of bread and told me to walk through the forest and give some to anyone who asked. I did exactly what they told me, and the second beggar woman was a fairy in disguise. But instead of saying that whenever I spoke, diamonds and roses would drop from my mouth, she said that since I was so kind, I would never have any problems with my teeth." Really? Did it work? Well, I haven't had a toothache since I met her. I'd much rather have good teeth than have diamonds and roses drop out of my mouth whenever I said something, Summerine said. Think how uncomfortable it would be if you accidentally talked in your sleep. You'd wake up rolling around on thorns and rocks. That never occurred to me, Eleanor said, much struck. Was that everything? Summerine asked. No, Eleanor said. Aunt Ermintrude persuaded one of her fairy friends to give me a gown and a pair of glass slippers to go to a ball in the next kingdom. And I broke one before I even got out of the castle. That's not so surprising, Summerine said. Glass slippers are for deserving merchant daughters, not for princesses. Try telling my... This is so funny. Okay, tried telling Aunt Ermintrude that, Eleanor said. I think she was the one who found out that Worong was going to ravage a village just over the border, and arranged for me to go and visit on the right day so I could be carried off. She didn't even warn me. I suppose she thought that if I knew, I'd mess it up somehow. I don't think I would get along very well with your Aunt Ermintrude, Summerine commented thoughtfully. Oh, it wasn't so bad, at least at first, Eleanor said. Worong ignored me most of the time, especially after he found out I can't cook, and it was a relief not to have Aunt Ermintrude around anymore. Only then Gornal brought Ketterval and Zareth brought Helena, and they've been making life miserable for you ever since, Summerine finished. Why don't you stand up to them? I tried. But you don't know what they're like, Eleanor said, sighing. Ketterval goes on and on about correct behavior, and Helena dissolves in tears as soon as it looks like she's losing an argument. And they've both had dozens of knights and princes try to rescue them. I've only had 2. How did you do it? Summerine asked. I've had 9 already, and they're a dreadful nuisance. Eleanor stared at Summerine, then began to giggle. What's so funny? Summerine demanded. Ketterval bragged for a week because 2 knights and a prince tried to rescue her the first month she was here, Eleanor explained between giggles. She said it was some kind of record. You've barely been with Kazul for 4 weeks, and you have 9. And you didn't even mention it when Ketterval was here. She's going to be furious when she finds out. If she wants them, she can have them, Summerine said. Her expression grew thoughtful. Maybe they'd be easier to get rid of if I sent them along to another princess, instead of just trying to get them to go home. Oh, said Eleanor, and went off into gales of laughter again. Summerine gave her a questioning look. It's the idea of Ketterval being rescued by a second-hand knight. Eleanor gasped. Oh, dear. Leftover. Summerine's eyes began to dance. I could take a good look at them first to make sure they're worthy of her before I sent them on, she suggested. This was too much for either of them, and they both collapsed in laughter. You wouldn't really, would you? Eleanor said when she began to recover. Send the knights to rescue someone else? I certainly would, Summerine said emphatically. I meant it when I said they were a nuisance. I wouldn't want to upset Ketterval, though. I'll have to think about the best way of handling it. It's a good thing there probably won't be any more of them for a few weeks. I should have plenty of time to figure something out. How do you know that? Eleanor asked. Summerine explained how the sign in Thranduil and her sprained ankle. Eleanor was impressed and promised to help if she could. I'll tell Helena that you've twisted your ankle. I know she'll tell the next knight who comes to rescue her, and then it won't matter if your Prince Thranduil doesn't tell anybody. This settled, the 2 girls sat down and began looking through the books and scrolls Summerine had piled on the table. Eleanor, having been brought up as a proper princess despite the tiny size of her country, did not read Latin, so Summerine had to examine those scrolls herself. There was a sizable stack of books left, however, and Eleanor waded into them with a will. It was Summerine, however, who finally found the spell they were searching for. I think this is it, she said, looking up from an ancient crumpled scroll. Being a spell for the resisting of heat and flames of all kinds, in particular those which are the product of magical beasts. She read, "Yes, there's a list, and it includes dragons." "I would think dragons would be at the top," Eleanor said. "Is it difficult?" "It doesn't look hard," Summerine said, studying the page. "Some of the ingredients are pretty rare, but it says you only need them for the initial casting. After that, you can reactivate the spell just by throwing a pinch of dried feverfew in the air and reciting a couplet." "That's not bad," Eleanor said. She came around the table and peered over Eleanor's shoulder at the faded ink. "Is it Latin?" "No, it's just an ornate style of writing," Summerine assured her. "It's not hard to read, once you get the hang of it. See, there's the couplet. Power of water, wind, and earth, turn the fire back to its birth." "It's a variation on a dragon spell," Summerine added thoughtfully. "How do you know that?" Eleanor asked. "The court wizard at home mentioned it when he was teaching me magic," Summerine replied, studying the directions. "Then maybe it really will work on dragonfire." "Can we get all the ingredients for the initial casting?" "I think so, but it'll take a while," Summerine said. "I don't have any wolfsbane, and I'm not at all sure about unicorn water. Come on, let's check and see what we need to get." They found more of the ingredients than Summerine had expected, and she began to wonder whether one of Kazul's previous princesses might have studied magic. They did not, however, find any wolfsbane or unicorn water, nor were they able to locate any white eagle feathers. Eleonora discovered a very cobwebby jar labeled powdered hen's teeth, but it was quite empty. Summerine made a list of the ingredients they still needed, while Eleonora changed back into her pearl-embroidered dress. Eleonora took a copy of the list and went back to her quarters, much excited to see whether she happened to have anything useful in the dusty, disused corners of her dragon's kitchen. Summerine doubted that she would find anything, but there was no harm in letting her look. As soon as Eleonora left, Summerine tidied up the kitchen and put all but 2 of the books back on the shelves in the library. One was a scroll of spells in which she had found the fireproofing spell, because she wanted to take a more careful look at some of the other charms and enchantments it described. The other book was a fat volume bound in worn leather with the words Historia Dracorum in cracked and flaking gold leaf on the cover. Summerine had decided it was time she really got to work on her Latin.
Bye!